EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, a Tuesday edition of Birds 365, leading you right through the offseason into training camp. Eagles it's set to get back not until the end of July, so a little bit of a lull period here in the offseason, but not here on Birds 365. We will bring you the content every single day leading up to the 2024 football season. Highly anticipated now, 2024 football season. Every year is anticipated, though. What am I saying, Johnny Mac? Johnny Mac, good morning to you, sir. How you doing?
Doing well. Yeah. Every season's anticipated. Maybe the Eagles are hoping the Phillies run, takes a little bit of the microscope off them, but not if they keep saying stuff. As predicted yesterday, some of the local radio stations took off with Jaylen's comments or lack of comments. He didn't even make any comments. It was essentially not talking. And then, hey, when you're the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, you do have to realize that people will parse your words, every single one of them, upside down. So when you speak clandestinely or you don't maybe get across what you want to get across, it's going to become a thing, especially when you're away for 6-7 weeks. And that's what we have here. And that vacuum fills up. All the amateur psychologists are out there. And boy, they went off about it yesterday. So I don't know what you felt about it, but.
Well, look, our word of yesterday's show was intentionality. And I do believe that Jaylen does speak very intentionally, especially when he's talking to the media and potentially, especially when he knows there's a 6 to 7 week lull period. So I don't know. I didn't want to make too much of the comments, but John, to be honest, like I told you yesterday, you're my voice of reason typically, and I listened to Dan go off on the Jaylen comments, and I heard WIP.
That's a shocker.
Yeah, right. You kind of said it is a little bit of a problem for Nick Sirianni, and I agree. That's how I felt. But once I heard that, I knew that all right, there is some merit to this. You don't want your coach and your quarterback not on the same page. We will get into that. I'll ask you a little bit more about that. But before I start today's show, front one, I want to welcome everybody in. Welcome in Mike, Fittery, Crowley, Jason, Rashid, Wilfredo, Dank. We appreciate all of you guys for being here this morning. Please drop a like on the show as we appreciate. There's plenty of spots you can spend your time this morning, and you're here on Birds 365. So we appreciate that. But I want to start with one of our good friends of the show, Tommy Lawler. Tommy Lawler put out an article, and he said, I could talk about Jaylen Hurts, and I could talk about Jeffrey Lurie selling the team, but I want to talk about.
By the way, he's not selling the team, but go ahead.
No, his part, stake or whatever it was. He said, these are good times. Eagles have had 3 straight winning seasons. They have a star quarterback. Kelly Green jerseys are back. They just spent big money on a running back. And it reminded me of you, Johnny Mac, because even when we're hypercritical of this team, sometimes we forget how good things are in Philadelphia. And I know it's not all good. They didn't end the season last year very good. But I just wanted to open the show with a little bit of optimism in terms of these are good times for the Eagles. We got a star quarterback. We've been, to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. We are competing every single year, and I think getting better at that. Howie Roseman has found his stride as one of the best GMs in football decisively. So just your thoughts on Tommy telling us how good the times are in Philadelphia right now.
Well, yeah, they are. I try to bring that up all the time. I mean, we just went through from followers of the Eagles, the greatest stretch of football in modern Eagles history, certainly when they won 29 of 32. I mean, that's just absurd in an NFL that is really built on parity. And then it falls off, and obviously you're not trying to dismiss the collapse because it was real, and I think everybody's trying to figure out why, and that's part of the reason why you see all this upheaval and certain things being questioned and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it at Nick's new word, the 30,000-foot view as a CEO coach, it's like, yeah, these are pretty good times for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think there's a generation of fans, and really started with Andy Reid. Let's give Andy his flowers, his credit. Um, who don't understand that it isn't always like this, or it hasn't always been like this. Not that you're not going to have bad seasons. There have been bad seasons mixed in there, but the consistency of this team, yeah, the playoff appearances, the division titles, the Super Bowl appearances. Yeah, not every city has that. So, but if you're used to it, the expectation, we talk about expectations all the time. They rise, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want to expect, that's how you are good and great. You want to expect to be better than other teams, and the Eagles do. Um, and it's a good place to be as a fan. Team, they're relevant, and that right alone starts right there. They beat a lot of teams who are irrelevant. So, but that's hard for people in the moment to see, I would say. If you look at just NFC East titles, you know, 1980, 1988, that was it. And 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2006, 2010, 13, 17, 19, 22. 1980 and 88 for the younger people. The Cowboys owned this division, and when they weren't owning it, it was owned by the Redskins, the then Redskins, and when it wasn't, with Joe Gibbs, it was the Giants and Bill Parcells, and now it's the Eagles and everybody else.
Yep.
Cowboys are good, but, the Eagles have been clearly better over that time frame. Um, so, yeah, I mean, in the moment, it might not look great at times, but overreaching, yeah, this has been one of the best organizations in the NFL.
Yep, I think it's better than being the Panthers or one of those other teams. 2024 will be the first time, well, if they have a winning season in 24, which I think we all anticipate they will, it'll be the first time since 2000 to 2004 that they had 4 straight winning seasons. Obviously, as you mentioned, 4 straight NFC East titles in that time, all under Andy Reid. So pretty good. I mean, look, I know there's a lot of fans out there.
By the way,
saying participation trophy, thinking, I get it. Believe me, I get it. I don't like finishing second place either, but it is the NFL. We're not going to win every year.
That's Ricky Bobby rules have taken over the world.
Yeah.
By the way, the NFC East was first year for the NFC East was 1967. So 21 years they won 2 titles. It wasn't great.
No, life before Jeffrey Lurie was brutal for any Philadelphia Eagles fans. I'm too young to have lived through those times or experienced any of those times, but certainly reading back on it as
but to your point, if your goal is to win the Super Bowl every year, you're going to be disappointed. Who was talking about Michael Jordan, won 6 titles, whatever. He played 17, 18 seasons. That if you ask most people in Sports Illustrated, they're the greatest athletes of all time. And it's always skewed towards modern people because people forget about older guys in different generations and tend not to understand. You have to you rate things in the generation, not against, because there's so much advancement from everything from equipment to nutrition, the player travel. So you should always grade players in any sport in their generation versus their peers. But even people who don't understand that, the greatest player of all time, and again, he won and most people certainly would say that even now, he lost more than he won. He lost his last game more than he won his last game. So if you're only litmus test is championships, with the notable exception of very few, Bill Russell and the Celtics and Yogi Berra and the Yankees going way back. You're going to be miserable. You're going to be miserable. Even Patrick Mahomes, trust me, when his career is over,
Yeah,
he will lose his last game more than he wins his last game. Tom Brady lost his last game more than he won his last game. These are the greatest of all time. So if you're Ricky Bobby and winning is everything, God bless you, but you're going to be disappointed an awful lot.
Happy to have at least a good, competent team that we can talk about every day here. Now, I'm one of the people that does want more. I think we should want more. I'm okay with that, but I also agree with Johnny Mack. You're not going to win every year. That's just inevitable reality. John, let's go back real quick to what we started with. Jaylen Hurts, the comments. I know we talked about it on yesterday's show a lot, but I want to get your perspective in terms of how overblown is it, or is it real? I mean, I got to ask.
Well, I think the comments.
How successful of a season can you have if Jaylen Hurts and Nick Sirianni aren't on the same page? And that's a good question. If those two guys aren't on the same page, I don't care how much money you spend on offense. How good can we be? Now, I don't think it will hinder the offense, but does it hinder our ability to win playoff games? Does it hinder our ability to make a run in the playoffs like that? What's your perspective?
Well, as far as the comments, I don't think the comments are the big deal, or the lack of comments, other than you're giving a baton to people and not telling them where to run, saying, "Hey, go wherever you want with this," which is never a good thing. By not explaining yourself or giving a better answer to what was essentially, and again, Martin described it to me as a softball question, so I can say that. It was an easy answer question, and he didn't give an easy answer. Instead, he paused and awkward, and then everybody took the baton. They run their separate ways. I don't really care about the comments. I've mentioned before the fact that Nick Sirianni has untethered himself from the quarterback is not a good sign for Nick Sirianni. You already have people. We can't lose Kellen Moore. There's a bunch of people that have said that to me. They haven't seen the guy call one game. They could say they talked about him in Dallas and the Chargers. We know how provincial this town is. Just, pause, pump the brakes. Let's see. And by the way, Kellen Moore didn't win any championships. And you got this whole group say, well, you can't lose Kellen Moore. You can't lose Kellen Moore. I mean, where's this coming from? But you already have this narrative that, if you're successful, you can't lose Kellen Moore. So it's a weird dichotomy when you untether yourself from the starting quarterback, especially, that could be fine if you have a mediocre starting quarterback or you're not expected to go anywhere. When you have a $255 million quarterback, you probably don't want to be in that position. But again, he had to put himself in that position, because if he didn't, he probably would have lost his job. So my whole framework, and you know this, Zander, from day one, has been the setup. I don't like the setup. The fact that Nick is not going to be involved. Again, everybody's focused on Jaylen's comments. I'm more focused on Nick's comments, because he admitted, I'm not going to be spending as much time with him. And that to me is a bad situation, is a bad setup. And I don't like it. So I said this on yesterday's show. I'll say it again. Here's what Nick said. When he was asked about the consistency of that relationship between him and the quarterback. And he said, That's a great question because I'm not with him every second of every day like I have been in the past. So it's about being intentional, and that's where we got into the intentional stuff. But I know this when I'm not in there every single second of every single day, that means I'm around everybody else because my relationship with Jaylen Hurts is highly important. But my relationship with Milton Williams, he pulled Milton out of the air, is highly important. My relationship with Clint Hurt, he pulled him out of the air, is highly important. My relationship with Howie is highly important. And that's what you get when you're not so zeroed in on being with Jaylen Hurts and the quarterbacks and the offense every single time of every single day. Well, that's not true. Look, I like the lip service part of it, and he's talking about connection, and he's talking about connecting with people. That's fine. But let's be honest, this is the NFL. There's no more important relationship than coach and quarterback.
Yeah, especially when you have one, you're not a defensive coach. Two, you have Vic Fangio, who's been a 40-year defensive coordinator in the NFL. I don't really think Nick Sirianni is having much say or much impact on what's going on the defensive side of the football. He named Milton Williams, he named Clint Hurt, he named all these defensive positions like Nick Sirianni. Like, you weren't brought here to be a defensive guy. You've never been a defensive guy. I get it. He wants to highlight that he's being more of that CEO head coach. I don't think I'm buying that shtick. I think he's doing it.
Well, I'm not buying it from the perspective of it's just as important as the relationship
Right.
with quarterback.
Agreed.
It just isn't. And I'm not picking on Milton. It's not fair. You could say Aaron Donald, Sean McVay's relationship with Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford is more important than his relationship with Aaron Donald. I'm not saying they're better players than Aaron Donald. It's one of the best defensive players of all time. It's just the nature of the game and the nature of the position and the nature of what it is. So when everybody's focused on Jaylen's comments, I was more focused on Nick's, which were a bigger concern, but I knew that going in. So it all comes boiling down to what would have happened. And we don't know. I think I know, but we'll never know. If Nick Sirianni pulled the Doug Peterson and went into Jeffrey Lurie's office and said, look, I won 29 of 32 games. Yes, we collapsed at the end of the season. I'm not trying to defend it, but you've seen us, have the longest stretch. This is what I would have tried to sell Jeffrey on. The most successful stretch of football in your history, and you've owned this team for a long time. That hasn't gone away. We know how to do it. I need my guys. Give me one more chance. That's how I would have handled it. I think Nick went in there with he's got a more, probably, to be honest, more astute political nature than I do. And certainly Doug Peterson did, and knew that if he said that, he'd probably lose his job. And he didn't want to lose his job. And we are where we are. And I think the setup is shit and it's crap. But anytime as a head coach, especially an offensive head coach, you untether yourself from a franchise quarterback, that is not a good sign. Period.
How good can the Eagles be with this setup this year?
Well, they're going to have to out-talent people. And that factors into a lot of things. We had somebody yesterday. They're the most talented team in football. No, they're not. They have a very good starting 22. So health is going to be very important. And if those guys are out there for 17 games, they're going to be pretty good. But another one and done in the playoffs, is that acceptable? Probably not. If the injuries start to pile up in the wrong place at the wrong time, that could affect things dramatically because there's a lot of concerns about depth all over the place. So yeah, I don't like the way it's shaping up. as far as the setup goes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either. I think they can overcome it, but I got to be honest. I know I don't want to make a deal about the comments, but the comments open a wormhole that then reveals things that you start to worry about, which is the relationship of the coach and the quarterback. If that's not good, I don't think you're going to a Super Bowl.
Well,
I don't think you're
I
going
don't
to.
even think the relationship being good or bad, because his relationship with Kellen Moore is going to be more important.
Yeah, but Nick Sirianni's still the head coach of the football team.
He is, but he's not running the offense.
Okay, so
what you know, I don't even care at this
right. So Nick
point.
Sirianni's job this year is get out of the way,
It's not,
basically, in a way.
no, because there's a lot of other things when it comes to being a head coach that coordinators don't even have to think about. And you know, it talks all the time, everything from logistics and practice schedules and setting up practice, you know, setting up periods. Now, fans don't think this kind of stuff is important, but preparation is probably the defining nature of good teams and good coaches, Andy Reid being the most notable example. You know, if you're struggling in red zone, you got to tweak your practice to make sure you're sharpening up red zone. There's a whole boatload of, you know, it might be a contract situation. You might got to smooth things over with a player at some point. There's a whole boatload of stuff head coaches have to deal with, that coordinators are just about football. You know, Bick's only worried about the defense and beating Green Bay on September 6th. Kellen's only worried about the offense and beating Green Bay on September 6th. Nick's got to get him there. You know, there's a whole training camp to plan and all that kind of crap. Yeah, it's a big job. It's a big job. And I think one of the best things, ironically, about Nick Sirianni is he felt he wasn't doing a good job early in his tenure in 2021 doing that kind of stuff. And he handed over the play calling to somebody he trusted implicitly in Shane Steichen. And the Eagles kind of took off from there. But, you know, and then the assumption is, well, because Shane took over as the play caller, they didn't change the offense. It was Nick's offense. The preparation for that sheet is done during the week. So you have all your list of, all right, third and long, third and medium, third and short. All that's done during the week. Now there's a feel for, you know, certain things, and that can change. But yeah, you've known me long enough to know people overrate play calling. I've been saying that for years. Preparation, execution is far more important. I say it all the time. You could dial up the best play call in the history of mankind, but if the left guard misses a block, nobody knows it. So you better teach it, you better execute it. And that's the more important part.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying with Nick and how big the job is, but that to me doesn't sound like a role that the best head coaches are in, where your offense is handled by Kellen Moore, your defense is handled by Vic Fangio, and Nick is planning practices.
Well, that's not what I said. See, that's one thing I used an example of.
I know, but I'm saying
that's where
the two most important parts of a football team when you're playing in the NFL are your offense and your defense.
Yeah, but I can't open people's minds to who think you show up on Sunday and Shane Steichen or whoever they like is using a joystick and he's the difference. And I love Shane. And I think Shane's got a knack for being a play caller. And I think he's a better play caller than most. But to assume that that's the reason, first of all, if Shane's got crappy talent, he's going to have a crappy team. Second of all, as I said, the far more important, and Kellen Moore admitted this, Nick Sirianni's admitted this, Shane Steichen's admitted it, pick your favorite play call has admitted this. Anytime you boil it down, they will tell you, and Kellen said it with clean operation. What's most important to you as a play caller? It ain't the motion. It ain't orbit motion. Oh, you got to do this on 3rd and 3. No, clean operation. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Stay ahead of the sticks. All that kind of stuff. Every single one of them. Now, some of them have big egos. Not most of them have big egos. And that's the ironic thing about Nick Sirianni, and I think it's a good thing about Nick Sirianni. He was failing at those things that you just brushed off as not important. And the Eagles were failing because of it. So if they're not important, unless you believe, and unless anyone else believes, oh, the sole reason the Eagles turned around was because of Shane Steichen, which, and again, I love Shane Steichen. That's insane. If you think that's the sole reason they turned it around, it's always players first. Always, 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 always. And getting those players prepared and taught. I mean, I always say, I can't help you if you think that. And if you think that, you're not going to be convinced. But there's so many CEO coaches, and I've advocated long before Nick became this or became this version. I always used to argue with Jody. I want a CEO coach. I don't want some glorified play caller who's got his head and his thinking about the next play, screwing up game management, not paying attention to the defense, not paying attention to the special teams. You might just have 3 co-head coaches, offense, defense, special teams. I think that's absurd.
Well, 2 of those guys just competed for a Super Bowl. Obviously, each thing has its own set of problems, but I mean, Andy Reid is most of the time.
Andy is
for the most part, though. This is also different than Shane Steichen. That was Nick's offense. This is at least from our perspective on what.
Oh,
what
yeah,
we heard
I don't like this setup. I've said it from the start.
Not Nick's offense anymore. So
I don't like the setup. But the people that talk to Andy started. Andy's given up play calling so many times. Andy gives up play calling, and he said this publicly during games. Nobody knows.
Yeah, but you're focused on play calling. I'm talking about offense. Nick is no longer a part of his relationship to the offense. Seems like it's identical to what his relationship to the defense is. He's going to be in the rooms, but he's not a part of the game plan, the scheme, the things that are going into what make the offense and the defense work. Andy Reid is in those rooms. You and I both know that. He might not call every play. Okay, that's fine. Andy Reid is an integral part of their offense.
Well, Nick's not going to be not involved in game planning. He has said, and we'll see how it shakes out. He has said he's giving the offense essentially to Kellen Moore. That doesn't mean if the Eagles start 1-4 or 2-5, he can't say, yo, this ain't working. This did work. Let's do this. There's no evidence that, when he says he's not going to be hands-on and micromanage, that's different than, oh, he can't change anything. He can change whatever he wants. Now, I think he's smart enough to understand, at least early, if he does that, it's probably not going to go over well, because the whole thought process, well, you were stale, you need fresh ideas, you need new ideas and all that kind of stuff. So I think he's well aware that if he overreacts early, he's probably, to be honest, he's probably got to hold himself back from that. But the assumption that if they are performing poorly, that he can't change things, yeah, that's incorrect. And that goes for Vic as well. But it's a bad setup and it's a bad situation. And if things don't go well, obviously he's going to lose his job anyway. So he's damn well going to take, um, do what he wants to do going out the door. I would
But
imagine.
you're still comfortable. You're still confident that Nick Sirianni has a big role on this team that is important and will help them win games.
I don't know if it's going to help them win games because I think the setup is terrible. I don't like it. So I don't know if it's going to help them win games, but those to me are two different things. Those who think Nick Sirianni has no power, yeah, they're wrong.
I don't think they're wrong for thinking that, though. They might be wrong about it being true, but I think the things that have happened would certainly be okay for somebody to believe that or want to believe that.
Well, I understand why they do believe it, but that's again, that's a different frame that generally those people believe the most important thing is play calling. So, okay, if you believe that, I can't convince you otherwise. So they're starting from, in my opinion, they're starting from a poor, their premise is off base. So I always say never argue with somebody's premise who's off base. I mean, there's nothing I can do to change that. But I would just say, forget about Philadelphia, go anywhere. And when these offensive coordinators or play callers or head coaches who are play callers talk about their offense, you can see it all over the place. Transcripts, the internet, you can see it all over the place. Look into what they say about their offense. To a man, every one of them talks about things like clean operation and preparation and execution more than they talk about play calling, because that's, John McKay, one of the great quotes of all time, was asked about the team's execution. I'm all for it, he said. That was the awful Bucks when they were 0-14. That is far more important than people think. Oh, Kellen Moore's going to pull this out. I mean, I'll ask you, do people really think Kellen Moore is more important to the success of the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles than Jaylen Hurts or A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith or Saquon Barkley or Dallas Goedert or the offensive line, which I think is the most important, to be honest? Do they really think that?
I don't think that, but I think there is a line of thinking out there that, yes, if the play caller doesn't put the skill position players in the right positions or call the right plays to get them open. I mean, just to go dumb on an example, if you call four verticals every play, you're not going to have a successful offense. So from that perspective, I'm saying I think people do put a lot of stock in who's calling the plays and how they.
Well, they put a lot of stock in it. That's not my question. My question is, do they not think that A.J. Brown helped Nick Sirianni or Shane Steichen or Brian Johnson or Kellen Moore? It's always about those guys who aren't on the field putting the best football player the Eagles have in the right position, or he's not going to succeed. He makes up for their freaking deficiencies.
No, there's no doubt about that. I mean, good players are the most important thing here. No doubt about it. But I do still think you need competent coaches. Let's go to Rashid Mixon. Drops us a super chat. Thank you, Rashid. Looks like it came in twice, so we'll hit it on it and give you a good response. 2017 and 2022, we went to the Super Bowl. Key to both of them, good players, good coaches, but the biggest thing was continuity. same coaches consecutive years. That's a good point, and I think that's where some people are even in a bad spot with where we are in the offense right now. Johnny Mac, any offense or any response to it?
Well, yeah, I'm a big continuity guy, but when you do have success and when you do reach the Super Bowl, you're going to lose coaches. That's part of it. And there's nothing you can do about that. So it happened both years, not by accident. I mean, when you make the Super Bowl and when you win a Super Bowl, certainly other teams covet what you do. That's the way this league is. And the Eagles lost Frank Reich and John DiFilippo. After winning Super Bowl 52, they lost both coordinators after losing Super Bowl 57. You're going to lose good coaches. It's just the nature of it. Our buddy BLG, hopefully he'll be on tomorrow. Said that's accepted. There's nothing you can do about it. That's what you want, right? You want to get to the Super Bowl. It's better than the alternative. So then you got to go. But Frank's a perfect example because to this day, I get people who tell me, well, Frank Reich was responsible for the Super Bowl win. Because, a lot of Doug Peterson, and Doug called the plays, by the way. It's not even, Frank didn't even call the plays. But because the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and then they regressed after winning the Super Bowl, it became Doug's fault to a large group of people. I won't even say large, a segment of the fan base. And he called the plays to win the Super Bowl. There's a damn statue in front of the stinking building. But people give Nick Foles credit for that. So, the goalposts constantly change. But, Frank had a significant run in Indianapolis, and then he went to Carolina. Where's the greatness?
Yeah, not great for him right now.
John DiFilippo, I love John, not even in the league. He didn't make it a year. Minnesota hired him to be the offensive coordinator. He didn't make it a year. Well, nobody can get along with Mike Zimmer, but he didn't make it a year. He's not even in the NFL. Where's the greatness? Players, players, players. And then players, players, players. And then you get the coaches.
Yeah, now, I think also that point highlights your previous point about the other stuff does matter too. It's not just you can't take anything in a vacuum and expect success. There's a lot of parts to it. So I do get that point. I got to be honest though, I just am in a state right now where I don't. I mean, if Nick Sirianni and Jaylen Hurts are not there, just to go back to the original topic that got us here, I don't know how good of a team we can be. I question that. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I always say with coaches, your job is to get each player a little bit better. That's it. That's your goal. And that's different from, if you're Jamal Singleton, all right, you're not expecting to turn Kendall Milton into Saquon Barkley, right? You're trying to get Kendall Milton up to his ceiling as a player, and you're trying to get Saquon Barkley a little bit better than he was in New York. That's the definition of coaching. Zach Bond, that to use quarterbacks, Tanner McKee, Will Grier, get them a little bit better. If they don't have the ability to be one of the stars, potential future Hall of Famers like AJ Lane, not everybody can be Lane Johnson. With all due respect to Jeff Stoutland, who's, maybe the best assistant coach in the NFL, you can't. You've seen it with Jack Driscoll and Sue Opeta. He probably got those guys to a little bit higher point than they would have gotten in other places, but he can't turn them into Lane Johnson.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I mean, that's unequivocally true. So we'll move on. I'm going to come back. We'll go to a break here. I do want to stay on the Kellen Moore stuff though, because your buddy Ed Kratz at SI did write about the motion in the offense. Devontae Smith made a comment about it. So I'm curious to hear how you think. I'll get your opinion and then your analysis of what you think that offense could look like with Kellen Moore. And the one thing I think it will bring back as well will be, the Saquon Barkley topic of how they're going to use him. We've debated it in the past before. I'm leaning more toward how you think they're going to use him, but how are they going to use him? We'll find that out soon enough. So let's go to a commercial break. I want to thank everybody in the chat for being here, contributing to our conversation this morning. We appreciate each and every one of you. Drop a like on the show if you're enjoying Birds 365. I want to get to at least 100 likes during the live show. I think we're at 47. So we need 53 more likes at least to get to 100 during the live show. So thank you all for being here. Let's get to a commercial break. Stay tuned. Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Tuesday's edition of Birds 365. June 11th, we are moving right along, Johnny Mac. 6 months ago, the Eagles got knocked from the playoffs. That doesn't feel like 6 months to me. Went by quick, and we're just under, I think we're almost 40 days until they're back at training camp, and then just under 90 days, around 85 days, somewhere in that range. I want to say it's 87. That's my guess. Till the opener in Green Bay. I mean, it moves right along, though, Johnny Mac. Let's get into the offense. We just talked about Nick Sirianni, a passionate discussion about Sirianni, the offense, the coaching roles. What do you expect to change in the offense this year with Kellen Moore? I know you guys talked about the motion. That was one of your biggest questions. I think that was your question specifically to Kellen Moore in his opening press conference about motion in the offense. You heard Devontae talk about it. AJ followed up on it. How do you think that's going to change the offense this year?
I think people will be excited by it. I do think they needed a little bit more, using Nick's own definitions as, I think it's fair. Always says a wise man avoids all extremes. Always says you never want to be bottom 5 in anything in the NFL, where they were bottom 5 in motion consistently. Now the question is why? Why? And Nick has always said, well, you don't motion just the motion. Couple things, and he's right from that perspective. It is, and even Sean McVay's, probably the king of motion right now. He calls it the illusion of complexity. It's not this big saw. You're trying to stress the defense, test their discipline, test their eyes. And there's some good that can come from it. It's not a magic fix-it, a magic elixir to fixing any offensive problem. For instance, sorry, you can't block. Motion ain't going to help you. So, part of it is that more bunch formations as well, which will, that's what Devontae as well was talking about. A little bit easier to get the free release. So to me, the question is why, and play action. I mean, Kellen Moore's a big play action guy. So here are my concerns. And I've said it before. And then when you watch minicamp, you saw this underneath stuff. And Doug Nussmeier was talking about the 2.3 second rule. Get the football out of your hands. So what my concern is, what's going on here? Are you trying to turn Jaylen Hurts into something he's not? That to me is the worst case scenario. Brock Purdy 2.2, get the ball out of your hands, or even play action, big looping 7-step drops, trying to turn him into Kirk Cousins or somebody like that. I don't think that's a good strategy. So I hope that's not the case, but we have to see how it unfolds. I don't have them practicing. Practice is practice. I don't have a problem with them practicing getting the football out of his hands a little bit quicker, because that's been one of the weaknesses of this team. Too much of holding on to the football. And some good things can come from that as well, as you extend plays and make big plays down the field off schedule. So there's the fine line to that. So you have to see how it all envelops. Now, from Nick's perspective, he's talked in the past that Phillip Rivers, who he loves, didn't like motion, but Phillips was playing for 18 years and could identify the information he needed formationally. That's what he was more comfortable with. Assuming a younger quarterback can do what Phillip Rivers can is probably a poor assessment. And that's where I factor into there should have been a little bit more. But if Jaylen doesn't like it, which is a possibility, and I don't have that answer because no one will admit it on the record, off the record, any record. If he doesn't like it and he's uncomfortable with it, that's an issue. So all of this stuff is to be determined. But I will say, getting the football out of his hands quickly, dumping it off to the running back, which I've talked about a lot, play action, these do not seem like strengths of the Jaylen Hurts that we've seen turn into a star quarterback. Can you Can you get better in those areas and add them to what he does well? Yes. And I think if that's the goal, just accentuate those lesser things a little bit more. That's fine. But if you're trying to change it, I don't think that's going to work out well. So that to me is going to be basically the story of the season. What are they actually trying to accomplish with Jaylen Hurts? Are they trying to accentuate him as a player, or are they trying to change him as a player? If it's the latter, the Eagles are in deep trouble.
You haven't seen much, Johnny Mac, but of what you've seen so far, has it led you in a certain direction on what you think they're going to do?
Well, it hasn't been great, but that's my point. I if it's just practice and they're working on the things he doesn't do well,
right?
Which
I think is possible. I definitely think that's possible.
Yeah, that's fine. That's like the spring training pitcher working on a pitch he doesn't have.
Right.
And then if it works, he brings it into the real games. And if it doesn't, he junks it and goes back to what he does well. That is what I hope was what was going on with the Eagles. What everyone should hope was going on with the Eagles in the spring. But to conclusively say that's what was going on, I can't say that.
The interesting part of this offense to me is Saquon Barkley. We've talked about it in the past, and you mentioned, if they're going to the play action where you have the Kirk Cousins style of offense where you run to set up the pass and you have the 7-step drops. How are they going to use Saquon Barkley in your estimation? Is it going to be that passing role? I know you said you don't like that role, but they still might do it. Is it that? Is it bell cow back? Is it 3 down back? To me, that is good, but it kind of does play into the idea of you might be trying to change your quarterback if you go that route. How do you see the use of Saquon Barkley in this offense?
Yeah, I think he's going to be a 3 down back, and I think he's going to be a better back than they've had. And I think, it's going to be the same Eagles pass to get the lead, run to close it out. And I think they should be better equipped to do it. And then the passing game, he should be, I don't even know if he's a better receiver than DeAndre Swift. Because DeAndre's a pretty good receiver. Eagles fans never got to see it. But he's a pretty good receiver. I think it's about taking advantage of certain situations in the passing game. If somebody's, bracketing AJ, maybe you get a matchup with him on a slow-footed linebacker and you try to take advantage of it. That's where the feel, if people want to talk about play calling, that's where the feel comes into it. Say, all right, maybe I got 12 personnel out on the field. Maybe they got an extra linebacker on the field who can't run, and we can hit the wheel route. That's, to me, Saquon in the passing game will be more about impactful plays when he gets the opportunity, not about volume.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Volume, I think if he gets volume, I think that's a bad sign, to be honest.
How about volume as a runner, though? I mean,
volume as a runner, yeah. I mean, he's going to run it, yeah. That's not a problem. And the more they have the lead in the fourth quarter, the more volume it is. That's where I think Saquon improves them. I think they're better equipped in the 4-minute offense to close out games.
Yeah, but how do you get to that point? You got to get a lead to get to that point. So
that's where that's where AJ and Devontae and Dallas and Jaylen come into it. I mean, they're gonna throw the ball to get the lead and run it to close it.
Yeah, so I was asked yesterday on the National Football Show with Dan. I join him every day at 3:30 for anybody that watches Dan. I know a lot of our viewers in here watch Dan Silio's show as well. I'm on there daily, and it's funny to talk to you in the morning and then talk to him at night.
It's polar opposites.
Yeah, it's a tale of two two different shows, two different styles, two different media guys. But I do enjoy both of them. But he's concerned that Kellen Moore has coached quarterbacks who were nothing like Jaylen Hurts, and the Eagles hired him to bring in the offense that he ran in Dallas, which was ultimately the number one offense in the league at one point. Do you have any fears of that? I mean, I said to him, I think he's going to be a good offensive coordinator. He's going to look at the players he has. He's going to build his offense around them, and he's going to go from there. I was met with great pushback. Now, you could argue that that's overblown, but do you think that could be a problem? And it kind of leads to your point about changing Jaylen Hurts. Do you think that's something that?
Well, they hired him, and I'm more towards your side of that. They hired him to be a good offensive coordinator. If he's a good offensive coordinator, if he's not bringing the Dallas offense and inserting names and
right, yeah, that's foolish to assume.
He's not bringing the Chargers offense. And that's why I said I didn't like that phrasing, which now we know was bullshit, and I'm glad it was bullshit, of meshing the two offenses. If Kellen Moore's as advertised and he's a good offensive coordinator, that will come through the natural evolution. He will find out quickly what Jaylen Hurts does well and integrate it into his offense. If he doesn't, he's not a good offensive coordinator, and he's not going to be successful. So that'll take care of itself. If you're just going to go, hey, do what Dak did, yeah, I mean, he's a failure already. But he's not going to do that. He's not. I mean, you don't get to this level and do things like that. So, you know, everything is a work in progress, and we have to wait to see what it looks like. But yeah, that's just in a different way to say what I said before you asked that question, which is, all right, is this about getting the football out of his hand? Is this about play action? Are you not going to? Then he's a failure if he does that. But if he's just trying to improve those deficiencies, then he's being a good football coach.
Yeah, rising the tide, which will lift all boats, essentially, in Jaylen's skill set. I think that would be the best case scenario. But I think it's fair to wonder the other side of it. When you do see what they're doing in practice, you do look at it and you're like, oh, Dallas Goedert's talking about quick throws to tight ends. There's motion. So we'll see. I mean, I'm curious to see how it plays out. I'm hopeful Kellen Moore can be great, but I don't know that he's going to be that great.
Well, I don't. I mean, motion is. There's another thing. It's like, why does everybody think motion is this grandiose thing? I mean,
no, I just think it's an element you add to your offense that helps you run a better offense.
If you talk about the zig when everybody's zagging, that Howie always talks about, everybody does motion. Everybody copies Sean McVay. You're becoming one of the majority. They were the minority before, and they were successful actually until they weren't. And I get it. And that's what happens. But when you do everything the same as everybody else, it becomes who does it best. That's what it comes down to. If you're like everybody else, you're not zigging when everybody's zagging. You're going along with the crowd.
Right.
So be careful what you wish for. They were unique when they were winning 29 of 32. Copying Sean McVay ain't unique.
No. And I don't think you're going to be better at it than Sean McVay is, by the way. John, here's what I don't get, because I talk about this and even after the clarity of the comments that were made toward the end of last week, like, why did Nick ever say this is going to be a meshing of the offenses? That's where I'm like,
good question.
That's where I am just like, look, is Nick Sirianni?
I would say Mr. Competitive Advantage. Also, Also, I would say, and I'll be writing about this closer to the training camp. Also, I mean, ego's involved. I think that's part of it. Um, you know, he he loved his offense, and he took great pride in his offense.
Well, when his offense worked, it was highly successful. So
Yeah,
I have no problem
and
with
that's the
that.
other part of it. Again, he's sitting there, and I can't speak for Nick, but if I were Nick, I can talk about that. And if I won 29 of 32 games in this league, and somebody was telling me, um, your offense is high school and all that stuff that, some people would say about it, yeah, I'd be pretty upset. Um, because I don't know too many high school teams that can go out and win 29 of 32 NFL games. Um, but it's the nature of it. I think he understands. Um, you know, when you're successful, it's the players, and when you're not, it's the coaches. They know that. They know that's part of the job description because nobody wants to blame the players. Um, Fans, at least, don't want to blame the players. So that's where they go, and that's easy. Um, but if you're asking me why he said that, I think it was just ego related more than anything else.
Yeah, probably doesn't want to get up on the podium and announce that his offense is no longer his offense. I get that. I don't want to beat up on him too much for it. The tough part about it with Nick is my gut tells me not to like what I'm seeing, but then I also look at the success of the team for 3 years under Nick, 3 straight playoff appearances, a Super Bowl appearance, an NFC title, an NFC East crown. Like he has been a good coach if you're judging the team's success. So I don't want to bash him too hard, but I am concerned about him going into the year. I think he got knocked off his pedestal, and I think that maybe that's weighing on him a little bit. But let's move on, Johnny Mac. Let's go into roster weaknesses real quick. Just coming out of camp, I know we did our mini camp. Now that you've had a chance to see some of these guys, our depth chart, sorry, before we went into mini camp. Now that you've had a chance to see these guys, what sticks out to you as the weakest parts of this roster? To me, it's safety. I think I'd have to go safety where I think they need more help there. Now, they obviously have a lot of moving parts. They could move people to safety. But what is your weakness on this roster right now?
Oh, still linebacker. Not even close, I would say. I think they have good players at safety. A little bit light, and you mentioned, but they're going about the depth in a different way with some of the versatile players, Avante, and eventually they didn't use them at safety and mini camp, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if cross training with Cooper starts there at some point in training camp. And then Sydney's going to be back relatively early in the season, which I keep mentioning, Sydney Brown. I think they have some good players at safety. Linebacker, I'm not sure they have any good players. And, the one notable exception to that would be N'Kobe. And, everybody seems to be writing him off because he wasn't getting first team reps in minicamp, fresh off the Lisfranc surgery. He just got back. He didn't even, if you remember, he didn't participate in the voluntary OTAs. So he wasn't fully cleared until the second voluntary OTA. And by the way, I even fully cleared is probably not the best example because he was limited. And then in minicamp, he started to work in a little bit more. And he got some first team reps, a handful, and mostly second team reps. Ultimately, I think when training camp starts, he's still going to be the starter. He's going to be the guy they default to. Now, maybe he can't play, but I think he's going to get that opportunity. But yeah, I think there's this, Devin White had a very good mini camp, but that's made for Devin White. Shorts, athlete, when the offensive line is out there, I talk about it all the time, and they're leaning on people, and you have that play action, and you got a guy who's got a reputation of not being the most disciplined in the world, taking false steps, not being where he's supposed to be. I'm not ready to crown him, as Denny Green, my old buddy, rest in peace, would say, and Zach Bond. Contracts don't tell you everything, but they tell you a lot.
Yeah.
Zach Bond signed a 1-year deal that could be worth up to $3.5 million, but it's only the veteran minimum guaranteed, 1.125. I mean, you're not married to that guy as a starting all-ball linebacker.
No, but if he's playing better than Dean, right, he's going to get the slot. I would hope, at least. I mean, I know the NFL doesn't always work like that.
Yeah, but yes, you would hope, and it's not always a meritocracy. But I would hope the other direction. I would hope that he does not play as well as Dean, because if he does play better than Dean, you're in trouble. Dean's the guy who they think, or at least thought, was going to be a player, and they were going to build that whole group around. And if he's not a player, and he very well may not be, because he wasn't great when he was on the field. I'm not trying to say.
Have you seen enough from him to make a judgment one way or the other on where you think he will be?
No, I haven't seen any of them, basically, this year. I mean, he'll be fully cleared by training camp. And obviously he only played 4 or 5 games, whatever it was last year. Haven't seen nearly enough.
Well, that's why I'm saying. Let me just play hypothetical then real quick. Let's just assume Nakobe Dean is healthy for the season, fully healthy, going to be the starting linebacker. Is linebacker still a weakness in your eyes?
Yes, until he proves otherwise. But he's the guy with the upside.
I think Devin White has upside. Strictly the pedigree. If you can unlock it out of him, I'm not saying you're going to. I understand the concern with him for sure, but I think he has upside in this defense.
I mean, the sample size is pretty stinking large at this point. 76 games, 5 seasons, 84 if you want to continue going to the postseason. Under a really good defensive minded coach. I think people are buying into a weird narrative there, I would say. That is a large sample size to assume, the light's going to come on. Crazier things have happened, but I wouldn't bet on it if I were a betting man.
That's fair. A lot of people in the chat saying edge rusher Johnny Mac, defensive end is a need for the team, or at least a weak spot on the roster. How do you evaluate the edge rusher? I know they made the move on from Hassan Reddick. That deal is starting to look better for the Eagles as he's.
Yeah. By the way, anybody apologizing for that?
Actually, I will give Cilio credit. He came out and said, "Hey, look, this is now looking a little bit different than we thought originally." I just don't get why Joe Douglas makes a trade for that guy without a deal in place.
Well, Joe's GMing for his job. We talk about all that. He's in a different mentality of Howie Roseman.
Yeah, but doesn't it look worse to him to trade for him? And then the
player
player holds.
Play. I mean, Hassan Reddick, who cares if he's at off-season work? I mean, that's Joe's mentality. I mean, who cares? He's not going to be at voluntary work. And I don't know if he showed up or not.
No, I think it's today. So we're going to find out today if he shows up.
Yeah. I assume he's going to show up. He probably won't do much, but he probably doesn't want to incur the fines. I think they only have 2 days. So maybe he will. It's $50,000, but obviously wants money. So he probably doesn't. He'll probably show up and watch, maybe he'll have a James Bradbury-like injury, individuals.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I ultimately think he'll show up. But the off-season work doesn't matter for Hassan Reddick. And I get it from Joe's perspective of they got a really good defense. The Jets, really gifted defense. People are talking about talent. the New York Jets are a bad team. Like they got a much more talented defense than the Eagles. So if he can fit in there, he could have a big season. So and Joe, as I said, he's GMing for his job. But from the Eagles' perspective, look, it all comes down to their evaluation of Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith. If Bryce Huff is the player they think he is, they're going to be fine. If Nolan Smith can become a competent rotational piece and is even near what they thought he was coming out of Georgia, they're going to be fine. If those players don't hit, they're going to be in trouble. But Bryce Huff I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be good.
Because I'm not there yet. I haven't seen anything to put me in the otherwise, but I do wonder, we talk about the funny part about the Joe Douglas conversation. You say he's coaching for his job. I'm like, really? The Jets are more relevant than I've ever seen him in my lifetime. I think maybe he shouldn't.
Oh, no. I mean, obviously it's not his fault because Aaron got hurt last year, but they had a terrible season.
They got some good players on that team, though.
The Zach Wilson stuff, and failing to Joe's got to win this year or he's out, and win pretty significantly. Yeah, but defensively, I mean, they were great defensively last year. Nobody knew it because they stunk so much offensively.
Yeah, I think that helped Bryce Huff was going to be my point. Yeah. So I'm curious to see how Bryce will be.
Well, it's going to help Hassan Reddick. Quinnen Williams is the best player on that line, but it's Jermaine Johnson's a first round pick. Will McDonald, he hasn't even done anything. He's Solomon Thomas is there. They're loaded up front. They got great linebackers. Quincy is Quinnen's brother. CJ Mosley still playing at a high level, and they have Sauce Gardner and company in the defensive backfield. DJ Reed's a really good player. They're loaded on defense. Defense is not their issue. But obviously Aaron Rodgers has got to be healthy, and they got to win. They got to win games, and they should win that division if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, and that's because Buffalo seems to have taken a step back. But yeah, Joe's GMing for his job. There's no question about that. If they don't live up to those expectations, he's out. So he's in a way different situation than Howie. Look, I talked about that when Howie got a little bit frustrated about the question, and it was phrased as in a vacuum, basically. Oh, you got a conditional future pick for Hassan Reddick. It's about age. It's about shelf life. It's about youth, getting younger. All those things. Plus but the most important part is the evaluation of the players. The Eagles think Bryce Huff's going to be really good. And they think Nolan Smith has a chance to be really good. If they're wrong, they're going to be in trouble.
What about Josh Sweat? Where's he fall in this equation? Wait, let me real quick thank Wilfredo before you answer that. He's a big Johnny Mac fan. He just leaves us $1, but thank you, Wilfredo. Big Johnny Mac fan, Wilfredo. So thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Wilfredo. There's a few of those, but there are a few. I appreciate that. Yeah, Josh is a good player. Is he a great player? No. And that's where
that's the depth question, like if he can play well and Bryce Huff can play what we're hoping he can be.
Well, that's where the depth comes into it. You don't want Josh Sweat playing as many snaps as he played last year. Clearly wore down.
And I just don't see how he lowers his snap count.
Well, I brought up the back ended, which is kind of counterintuitive, but I think there's a chance that this is it. And Brandon confirmed it again. Anybody thinking he's going to change his mind. So in theory, Brandon could play more because this is it. And you're not trying to worry about the pitch count as much. So that factors into it. Bryce Huff obviously has to play a lot, and he hasn't done that. So you have to see how he holds up. And then Nolan. I mean, Nolan is healthy. He had the shoulder procedure. Right then, that might be the issue. If that's the issue, we might be talking about Nolan Smith in a whole different way in a couple months because he was having issues with his shoulder, and he doesn't like to talk about it, but he had surgery, and if they
He doesn't
fixed
like to
it,
talk about it because he had that comment when he first got here, and the PR team told him to shut the hell up about it.
yeah,
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
yeah.
Not a good comment there.
And if they fixed it to the point where it's working all the time, and he, by the way, he played every game last season, didn't play a lot. So it wasn't like he missed games.
He showed some flashes. I mean, not many, but he showed a couple flashes.
And he's gotten bigger, and that's part of it as well. Sometimes you need a year to get in an NFL weight room. He needs to get a little bit bigger. He has a little bit stronger. He has. So don't write off Nolan Smith just yet, I would say. Or do if you want to, but do it at your own peril. And then there's some lesser guys, Julian Okwara, Terrell Lewis, and obviously Jalix Hunt. But Jalix the Eagles have kind of admitted that he's a longer term project.
Yeah.
But he's got traits, as Howie will say. Who knows? He might be a natural.
Yeah, kind of looks like a Vic Fangio pick to me. Let's go to James Carver, Johnny Mac Super Chat. Thank you, James Carver. We appreciate you as always, brother. We're going to go to a break soon. We have Mark Farzetta coming up next, but I want to hit the Super Chat first. Since talking linebacker edges, Skip, if already mentioned. J-Mac, what's the story on Oren Burks? Never heard a thing about him in rookie camp or OTA. Well, he's not a rookie, so he wouldn't be in camp, but OTAs or mini camp.
Yeah, he was there. I mean, he was running on the second team with Jakobi mainly. Yeah, he's a good third linebacker, good special teams player. I think everybody just kind of pencils in Oren as that. That's what he was in San Francisco. That's what he'll be here. So, do you want him? You saw the Super Bowl. I think, once Dre Greenlaw had that freak injury, they went at him hard and were pretty successful. Kansas City. So he's not the best in pass coverage, but I would say he's a good backup linebacker and a very good special teams player. And that'll be his role. Maybe you hope Ben Van Sumeren can take the next step. Probably has a bigger upside because of his athleticism. But, when Ben got here, he was so raw. But he's so gifted athletically. It's a guy you probably want to find a way to keep around to see if he can keep developing. But yeah, Oren's settled in as that backup. Right now, I would say he would be the third, third or fourth linebacker, but probably on game day being the third. And with Zach Bond, because we were talking about linebackers before, if Nakobe Dean shows up in training camp, he's completely healthy and he's the starting middle linebacker, that would knock Devin White to the weak side. And Oren Burks is probably your third linebacker on game day. That could elevate Zach Bond to being in the edge rusher discussion because there's all that Andrew Van Ginkel discussion. But again, for all those comparisons, it's natural because Howie brought it up. And Vic himself has mentioned that Zach can do a bunch of different things, and Bobby King said it as well. Van Ginkel, I don't know, he's a top 10 player in PFF. He's getting $10 million a year coming off an injury. Again, contracts don't tell you everything, but contracts tell you Zach Bond ain't Andrew Van Ginkel.
Yep, that's the truth. One more super chat from James Carver, giving you a little bit of love at the end as well. So a little love fest for Johnny Mac this morning. I like it. Sweat didn't have a rolling passing camp. He's a left edge, almost always weak side, which is the least likely bonus dropper in Vic's decent Chicago. I'm a huge J-Mac fan too. Love you, J-Mac. Look, good stuff from from James Carver. Also a good point on Josh Sweat, who hasn't made much noise, but we'll see his role on the team. So James, thanks for the super chats. Thanks everybody in the chat for being in here, for liking the show. We appreciate you as always. Let's get to a commercial break. Mark Farzetta, the great Mark Farzetta, coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Valle Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in a Tuesday's edition of Birds 365, joined now by Mark Farzetta, host of the Farzy Show. Mark, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh, nothing. Just hanging out in the old studio. Really excited to talk to you fine people. John, Zander, always a pleasure. What's popping?
What's up, buddy? It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I have to ask your thoughts on people take the baton, they go whatever way they want. Where did Mark Farzetta take the baton with Jaylen Hurts and his stumbling and stuttering about Nick Sirianni's role?
I would have liked stumbling and stuttering. At least that would have been him saying something. The question was fair. It was basically say something nice about Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, it's a softball. Martin called it. Martin Frank, my buddy.
It was a wiffle ball. It was a wiffle ball.
Yeah.
And a
It's a softball. Just say something nice and move on. Mark's
right.
right.
That's all it was. And it was like, I compare it to this. It's like, let's imagine we all have like real jobs, like regular jobs, like where we're sitting in a cubicle or something like that, right? And someone's like, hey, say something nice about the person you share a wall with in the cubicle.
That asshole. No.
Exactly. That's like, even if you don't think the person's that, like, if you just don't have the highest opinion, but you're nice and you want to still be somewhat respectful and you don't want to make an enemy where you don't have to, you do exactly what Jaylen Hurts did. Jaylen Hurts acknowledged for me in that whole thing where he had to ask a follow-up question, like say something nice about Nick Sirianni. Couldn't. No, really, say something nice about Nick Sirianni. He's got a good message. Okay, cool, thank you. It is for me. It's confirming that Nick Sirianni. It's really what we already knew, and it's by Nick's own admission.
Yeah,
and Jaylen Hurts' own acknowledgement between 95% of the offense being different, and Nick saying that Kellen Moore has to make a decision. Kellen has to make a decision. Kellen's terminology. It's everything that we have kind of already known, but confirming it even further if you can do that. To me, what's going on with Nick Sirianni, like the worst I've ever seen a quote-unquote soft firing is obviously Howie Roseman in the final year of Chip Kelly, where they just stripped him of all, responsibility in the front office and pushed him away to the broom closet. Nick is definitely not in the broom closet, but he's the closest to the broom closet since that year with Howie Roseman. That's what I heard from Jaylen.
Yeah, and by the way, that didn't work out well, Mark.
I know that's the thing. They won a Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl 2 years later. If that's the way they're going to go about it, that's a ass backwards way of going about it.
How bad is this, Mark, for Nick Sirianni? Is it a little bit of offseason overblown, or is this a guy who is lost the football team, lost his control, and it will mean bad things for the Eagles in 24?
John, you and I know have talked about this in the past. You like the term CEO head coach. I still go with regional manager head coach.
Regional manager.
I can't go. I'm not busting him to assistant to the regional manager, but I am making him regional manager.
Well, I will say the Howie comp, the one thing about Howie, which I don't know people know, but I say it all the time. While Howie got exiled to the other side of the building,
right,
he also got a raise and a better job title. Now, don't get me wrong, it was still bad from Howie's perspective because Howie loves personnel, and Jeffrey knew he was taken away. But he still loved Howie, and he didn't want to lose him. He actually gave him more money. He gave him a raise. Now, if the Jets came calling, another team came calling to be a GM, would Howie have left? Probably, but he got a raise. With this situation with Nick, I think it's about keeping his high-paying job, and I don't like the situation. I think he saw it as a political animal and said, if I go into this office after that collapse to Jeffrey Lurie, and I say, Doug Peterson it, and say, oh, I won 29 of 32 games. Give me a mulligan. I need Brian Johnson back. I need Alex Tanney back. No scapegoats. I think he's out the door. I don't think that was I don't think that was Jeffrey Lurie saying you have to fire these guys. I think it was Nick being politically savvy and realizing he had to do something else to keep his job.
Absolutely.
It's not a good situation, Mark.
Yeah, Nick Sirianni being out on the street after this year doesn't immediately get a job. But if Nick Sirianni sticks around for another head coaching year at least, and this Eagles team does well, then that obviously is going to open some more doors for Nick Sirianni down the line. So he did the smart thing. I don't fault him for doing that. My issue, Zander, in terms of your question about how much this has me concerned, if Nick Sirianni came in at this level of power and sway, then I wouldn't have that much of a problem. But since we have seen this diminishing responsibility of Nick Sirianni since he's been the head coach, that is concerning. I mean, you're talking about a guy that came in as the head coach and play caller, quickly realizing play caller's a little much. I'm going to back off of that. And it worked out. He gave it to Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen flourished in the role. It was a little alarming to me that a lot alarming to me that going into last season, Nick Sirianni, even with Brian Johnson, now Steichen, of course, not exactly the most experienced of play callers coming into the position last year. Brian Johnson, literally no play calling experience at the NFL. And Nick Sirianni still thought it best to have that off his plate and in the hands of Brian Johnson. And when the opportunity presented itself down the line to maybe make a change when it came to offensive play calling, when the reports were coming out by our own friend Derek Gunn there about whether or not this offense was becoming predictable, he stuck with Brian Johnson and made the change defensively. That doesn't make any sense to me. And now we're going from, forget about game planning, it's all Kellen Moore. So I hate to refer back to the old cliche that we've all been talking about this offseason. What is it you say you do here? what is the role of Nick Sirianni? Is it just giving messages to this team? Is it just making them pull focus? Does this team have two head coaches, one of the offense, one of the defense, and a guidance counselor in the middle? Like, what does he do with this Philadelphia Eagles team? And that, to me, is the concern. Is he, as long as he stays out of the way and is there to play maybe good cop when Vic Fangio is being looked at bad cop, whatever case might be, then I could see him helping the team. But even that, I feel, is a stretch. To me, it's going to come down to these coordinators and how good a job they do with this offense and defense.
Yeah, well, now, but Zander and I talked about this, so I want to throw it at you, Mark. The idea of a play call, it drives me insane, to be honest. And let's use Shane as an example, because obviously there's a lot of revisionist history. When they changed play callers, when Nick changed play callers and gave it to Shane, nobody knew, if you remember.
Right. Not so much later.
Yeah. And still after, when we finally uncovered it and reported it, people assumed they made the change after the Raiders game. The Raiders game would be the famous Nick got the flowers thrown at him. And everybody's saying he's got to be. And then the next week was Detroit, and they destroyed the Lions at Ford Field. Different Lions, team lines are great now. They were not great then. They destroyed the Lions, and everybody thought, oh, that's when Shane took over. It wasn't. It was the next week against the Chargers. They actually lost that game, and then they took off and made the playoffs with Shane Steichen as play caller.
Mm-hmm.
But my point of bringing that up, Mark, is nobody knew. If it's that different to all these people, all these play calling people, if it's that different, how could you not know?
Right.
How could you not know? It's the most overblown thing in sports, play calling. It's about execution. It's about teaching. Don't get me wrong. Shane was very good. I would say with the callback, Shane would set people up. He'd use something in the first quarter, then go back to it in the big spot late in the game, maybe pull them a little bit. There's a little bit of feel for it, and he was great at it. But, boy, people do not judge play calling. They judge play results.
I was just going to say, and I know you and I have talked about that plenty of times in the past. This is a situation where I agree with you, and I agree with that statement. And generally speaking, that is correct. Most people will talk about the result. They won't talk about the philosophy behind the result, whether or not it was luck, whether or not it was actually something that was beautifully engineered by an offensive mastermind, or whatever the case might be.
Right.
That's an example of me, of a perfect example of people judging the result. But when you hear the term predictability, that's where I think it gets into people's heads like, oh, okay, hold on a second. This is a lot of, and I know everyone does tight end screens. I know everyone does wide receiver screens. I know everyone, when you have an athletic quarterback, will have plays that all of a sudden that athletic quarterback just makes it on his own. But when you see it at the clip that you saw, especially at the end of this past season, it goes a little bit more beyond result, and it goes more into the idea behind it. Devontae Smith blocking for who was Kenny Gainwell, where Devontae Smith got hurt.
He got hurt.
Yeah, but still, the play didn't go for anything either. So, that's something that I think a lot of people look at and go, okay, I understand you're going to run bubble screens, tight end screens. Why not get the ball in the hands of somebody who can make a play and somebody who can actually make a block? That's I think a lot of people.
I would say there's plenty to criticize. Don't get me wrong. Anybody who knows me, you know me well enough, Mark. I hate the bubble screen. It's the worst play in the history of sports. They should bar it from the game. It is so aesthetically unpleasing.
Might be headed that way.
I hate everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a perfect, and I always go to the Seattle game, but that a bubble screen is a perfect example. Typically, that's not the play call. Typically, the quarterback goes up and wide receiver screen I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They go to the line of scrimmage. Yeah, they check to it because it becomes a math equation. Oh, we got an extra man in the box. We're going to throw it outside. Extension of the running game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a play call, and you're judging the play call. It's a stupid play. I hate it, but it's not even a play call.
I'll put it to you like this. One of the things that I would talk about a lot last year, especially when it came to play calling and results of the plays and all that stuff, was kind of this like quad o blame when it came to the plays being run by the Philadelphia Eagles, whether it was called or it was just run. And you talk about Jeffrey Lurie and analytics, you talk about Nick Sirianni's input, Brian Johnson, and then what Jaylen Hurts feels comfortable doing, and Jaylen Hurts is going to check down to when he's seeing what's in front of him. Maybe he doesn't like what he sees, or he just doesn't understand what he sees, and he checks down to that play. And the reason I bring that up is because by the admission of Shane Steichen and Jaylen Hurts in Jaylen Hurts' incredible runner-up MVP season, and the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, they talked about how that has become a comfort zone play for Jaylen Hurts. And that's not a good thing, because if you're going to that many screens, then that shows either you don't know how to beat what's in front of you, or you don't recognize what's in front of you that the defense is presenting. So that's something that I'm hoping Kellen Moore is helping the transition with, to kind of expand the comfort zone of Jaylen Hurts, so he doesn't have just one or two plays that he goes to that he feels like, okay, this will get me 3 yards, this will get me 2 yards, whatever it might be. And I'm hoping that's what this offense is doing now with the new coaching staff.
Farji, let's move on from Nick Sirianni. I'm done talking about him today. I got to be honest with you. What else did you take away from minicamp last week? We learned a lot from the brief amount of time we had, but
yeah,
we did learn. I always say to John, I like when you guys go down there. We do get some stuff, whether people like to joke about it or not. What did you take away from what you saw from minicamp last week?
Keely Ringo shouting, "Don't forget about me." That's what I kind of took away. But at the same time, here's what's great about it. And if Howie Roseman went into this offseason, which he did say he did, if he went into this offseason looking for competition at the cornerback spot, oh, they got it. Number one, Keely Ringo coming out and saying how when he was asked the question about drafting 2 corners at his position after having a decent rookie season, of course, and coming on strong, especially late when the Eagles needed somebody to come on strong. Hey, what was your feeling about drafting 2 corners, 2 guys that are looking to take your position here with the Eagles to add to the competition? And he said a greater chance for competition and a greater chance to get better. That's all I want to hear. Just that type of mentality I love. Also talking about him blanketing receivers, Quenyon Mitchell staying stride for stride with guys, Cooper DeJean doing his thing, just missing dropping a potential pick 6 in practice. You know, all that is music to my ears, that you're going to have stiff competition at the cornerback spot. That's number one. Number two is the moment is not at all lost on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. They understand what is being asked of them by this organization. With Fletcher Cox, not just with Fletcher Cox not being there, but the most shallow the interior defensive line has been for me in recent memory, to come in here and be those dominant players, to come in here and get numbers that will rival Fletcher Cox, get numbers that will rival Javon Hargrave, like get numbers like that, whether it's Jordan Davis eating up a double team or Jalen Carter doing it, somebody getting a little bit of pressure in the face of the quarterback, or somebody being able to plug the run, trying to go up the middle, opening up stuff for Josh Sweat on the outside, Bryce Huff, stuff like that. The moment is not lost on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Everything we've said, everything the fans have said about them going into this offseason and now in mini camp and approaching training camp, they understand what this organization is asking them to do. And I love that. The same thing can be said about Jordan Mailata's comments about Jason Kelce. Maintaining the standard set by guys like Jason Kelce is something that is not just walking out of the offensive line room as Jason Kelce goes into retirement. These moments are not lost in these players. They want to continue to carry that banner throughout their own careers.
Yeah. Well, I like all those thoughts. I go back to the offensive line, though, Mark, from the perspective of, I feel like every year it's like, and understandably, people love skill position guys. It's been a Saquon offseason. The offense, conversely, you mentioned the great defensive backs, the great young defensive backs, and how well they played. I've been ground floor on Keely Ringo. I think he's got a legit shot to be a real good corner in this league. Conversely, the offense looked pretty bad, and they're supposed to be great. And I have no concern from this perspective, Mark. The offensive line's not involved. They're not involved. Occasionally they stand out there for one team drill, but they're not involved.
Yeah.
The minute they get involved, and Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson keep pushing on people, everything changes. Play action is involved. You can't jump routes. All those young cornerbacks, you can only say good things about him. They're jumping routes. Well, you fake a handoff to Saquon Barkley, you got a ball step, and all of a sudden AJ Brown's behind you. Doesn't look as good. I don't worry about the offense until every year with the Eagles, it's about the offensive line. Offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. Jason Kelsey's the one change, but everybody thinks Cam Jurgens is going to be a good center. Maybe not that good, but Jeff Stoutland said, yeah, I didn't know if he can play guard. I know he can play center. They're going to have a good offensive line again. It's always the offensive line with the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
All the other stuff, it's just spotter for us. If the offensive line dominates, they're going to be good.
I think, yeah, oh, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. With the exception of Jaylen Hurts. And I have a lot of confidence in Jaylen Hurts. I think Jaylen Hurts is going to be another MVP candidate in this upcoming season, hopefully beyond week 11, week 12, when they played San Francisco. Going into that game, he was the leader in the clubhouse.
He was the MVP, yeah. At that point.
Yeah. I want to see another wire-to-wire solid year, like I saw in the second year of Jaylen Hurts, where he was an MVP candidate. And I think he'll do that again. But this is a new system. I have said many times before, this is the no excuse year of Jaylen Hurts. You have a very well experienced and play caller, an offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. You have weapons all around you. I still think the offensive line is going to be solid as we have seen it. I have no doubt that Kellen Moore physically can do a lot of the same things that Jason Kelsey has done. My question is the communication between the center and the communication between the quarterback, shifting protection, calling out protection, shifting all that. I want to know what that looks like. Tyler Steen, I need to see play more, obviously regularly at a right guard spot. But yeah, it's going to come down to the offensive line. It's going to come down to your quarterback. I mean, this is the NFL, so a lot of it's going to come down to your quarterback. Unless you have some incredible lights out number one defense, it's all going to be about how Jaylen Hurts is approaching the season and the production he's able to have behind what I do think will be a good offensive line and the weapons that are surrounding him. The no excuse year, the one excuse we've heard kind of time and time again with Jaylen Hurts is he needs 2 years. He needs 2 years. You don't have 2 years here. After the way it ended last year, ball that up and throw it away. Go out and be a top offense in the NFL and be that MVP candidate.
Yeah, I'm also sick of the comments on the revolving door coordinator. John says it all the time. He pushes back on me. If you're a good team, you're going to lose coordinators. Get used to it. So I'm tired of hearing Jaylen talk about that. But far as speaking of Jaylen Hurts, any concern Kellen Moore is going to try and change him to be different than what makes Jaylen Hurts great? I mean, he coached Dak Prescott. He coached, Justin Herbert. I'm not saying he's going to.
He coached Ben DiNucci. He coached Ben DiNucci.
Any concern that they're going to pull him out of what makes him good?
Okay. I heard Kellen Moore a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
Talk about Jaylen Hurts, and I want to believe him, but I feel like a scorned lover, gentlemen. I heard Nick Sirianni say last year we're going to embrace the uniqueness of Jaylen Hurts. We're going to embrace, and I thought that's the most beautiful way to put that, because that answers the question, like, should he run more? Should he stop running? Should he throw more? Like, no, hold on. If you have a unicorn, you let the unicorn be the unicorn. You let him fly. You know what I'm saying? You polish up the
horse, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's
You're
what I'm saying.
a wise man, Mark.
You got a Pegasus on your hands in the stable, and you're asking him to be like one of them show ponies. I don't think so. So for me, I heard Kellen Moore say not the exact same thing, but something extremely close to it. And it was along the lines of, we want Jaylen to be Jaylen. And I thought, I'm going to hold you to that, because I was hurt so bad last year when I did not see the Eagles embrace the uniqueness of Jaylen Hurts' game. And they time and time again, the only time they really did it was the tush push. But even then, you had a Hall of Fame center pushing in front of them. I need to see them.
And stealing a half yard all the time.
Stealing a half yard, exactly. I need to see them actually embrace the uniqueness of his game. And how about this? Make him better. We've seen him be pretty damn good. Go ahead and make him be better. Have a way for him to find consistency in his game. And the only concern I have from the Kellen Moore offense to Jaylen Hurts is not necessarily about letting Jaylen Hurts be Jaylen Hurts. It's the turnovers.
Yeah.
because they are
Yes.
gonna air the football out. If there's and John, oh man, I hate to rehash so many things, but we've talked about the single still being a good thing. You know, every once in a while, the defense is taking that deep ball away instead of taking that chance downfield. Where's the check down? Put the ball in the hands of Saquon Barkley. He could be a home run hitter catching a ball at the line of scrimmage. He can do that. I hope that is at least part of this offense, that it's coached into the brain. Two things with Jaylen Hurts. Every once in a while, take the single, work a walk. You know what I'm saying? And then the other thing I want to talk about with him is when it comes to Jaylen Hurts and situational football. If you're in the game, I always go back to because it's the perfect example. 8:15 left in the game in Seattle. This is not the end of the game interception to A.J. Brown where they improvised. This is the 8:15 left in the fourth quarter. You're up 4 points, 1st and 10, and he throws down the middle of the field to Quez Watkins. It gets intercepted. That's not on Quez. That's on Jaylen. That's a poor decision to make in the fourth quarter of that game. Put that kind of instinct into Jaylen Hurts' head, and I think this will be a much better season as well for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I with Jaylen, we don't talk about Jaylen that much. Excuse me, because I think everyone knows he's a good player. It's a matter of getting back to what his ceiling is. Can he be that runner-up to the MVP? Can he be that close? Can he be the best player on the field in the Super Bowl? Or, did what we see last year? But you bring up the turnovers, Mark. To me, there wasn't much difference between Jaylen Hurts in 2022 and Jaylen Hurts in 2023, except the turnovers. He had, now I think it was a little banged up with the knee, and that limited some of that uniqueness. But at the end of the day, he still had whatever it was, 15 rushing touchdowns. He had more rushing touchdowns last year than he had the year prior. He's got 28 over 2 years, I think. The numbers are phenomenal, but he turned it over too much. And he has a history. Some of those things are random. Coaches don't like to admit it. You have to look at every one. But like the interception in Seattle, that's awful. The interception against the Jets at the end, awful.
Oh, yeah.
Those are all Jaylen Hurts. On the other hand, the mesh point, Kenny Gainwell screwing up the mesh point ain't Jaylen Hurts' fault, but it's on Jaylen Hurts' resume because they always give that to the quarterback. He has always said one more thing, Mark. He's always taken care of the football until last year. If that goes back to normal, I think you're fine.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's the culprit. That's the culprit. You don't turn the football over with this offense, especially this is going to come down to giving the other team opportunities to score. And I know that sounds like the most basic thing you could say, but really, you look at last year. I would say a lot of things went wrong at the end of the season, but one of the things that made those games so close, and the Eagles being one of the playoff teams with the worst point differential in the league, that's why it was so close throughout the season. That's why in 2022, you had 6 games that you won by 10 or more points. Last year, you only had 2. So that's not exactly you controlling a game from start to finish. You continued to give opportunities to the team. Some of that to other teams. Some of that also comes down to the situational football, whether it's throwing the ball downfield to A.J. Brown against the Commanders and later having to just squeak out that win against the Commanders in overtime, or that's the Seattle game that we've referenced already. Situational football is going to become a big deal and giving the other team more opportunities to score. Turnovers obviously do that. That's why when you win the turnover battle, generally speaking, you win the game. Yeah. If they can coach that into Jaylen Hurts' head, they're going to be a lot more successful. And Jaylen Hurts is just, I don't want him to be, there's a reckless abandon and then cautious and scared. Like, where do you want him? You know what I mean? I just want him to be smart.
2021, he had 11 turnovers. 2022, he had 8. 2023, he had 20.
Right.
So, if you go back to 8 is phenomenal, but even if you're 12, 13, I think it's a completely different team. And oh, by the way, they still won 11 games with all those turnovers. it was 2 years ago, I think. Dak Prescott had 15 interceptions, and Eagles fans were saying, "Start." And by the way, he only played 12 games that year. The whole joke was, who led the league in interceptions and missed 5 games? Dak Prescott and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. C.J. missed 5, led the league in interceptions. Dak missed 5, led the league in interceptions. Jaylen had 15 in 17 games last year, which ain't good in the modern NFL. But his history says, and Dak did, that's why I bring up Dak regressed back to his mean, which is he typically takes care of the football. I think that happens with Jaylen Hurts this season.
I
optimistic?
No, I mean, I think that's very realistic. I feel like that's a good way to look at it. The other side of it is that they do try to air it out too much. And that's where he might not be ready to take that next step in terms of so much dominant passing in a Kellen Moore offense. But if Kellen Moore can get it right between the ears and the communication right between the ears with him and Jaylen Hurts, and Cam Jurgens is helping out on that offensive line, I don't expect him to be on the level of Jason Kelce as far as that goes in the communication and the respect that it might go between Kelce and Hurts as it would for Hurts and Jurgens in this case. But if all that comes together, which is why you get these workouts into the offseason, it's why Jaylen Hurts is in the building getting this extra work in. It's why you're seeing the social media pics, and people might laugh at it, but there was a question as to whether or not Jaylen Hurts and Saquon Barkley were going to be using the RPO under Kellen Moore. And one of the first things the Eagles put out on social media was them working on the RPO. So that's all things that I think will come together nicely by the time training camp breaks and the regular season gets underway. It's not going to be easy. They're going to have to work hard at it. Kellen Moore is going to have to understand how he's going to coach up this new team and his new quarterback, realizing that he's very different from Dak Prescott, and being able to go out there with the right stuff between the ears to go out there and execute and do it with great regularity.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I think you're right. I think that's the biggest thing that the Eagles offense did for this season is Jaylen Hurts. And to your point, the turnovers. Before I let you go, one more question. How confident are you feeling in the defense going into this season as compared to how you were last year? I think there's been a little bit of hype with the Vic Fangio and the young Cooners and all that stuff. Feeling good about the defense?
I feel better about the coordinator. Yeah. I mean, last year, people
a non-Greek god of defense. I can't say Greek god in front of Mark because he's not Greek. It's more.
He's one of them Italians, as some people might say.
Italian god doesn't sound as good.
The Roman god. You say Roman god. He just stole him from the Greeks anyway. Same thing. Anyway, Zeus, Jupiter, whatever the case might be. So I think that's the right correlation. But anyway, I like Vic Fangio being here. I'm in favor of Vic Fangio being here. I love that everyone's saying the glowing things about Vic Fangio being here. But people so quickly forget we were hyped going into last year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because Gannon was an idiot. Gannon's got to be better than Jonathan Gannon, Mark.
It can't be worse.
Can't be worse.
They had the best passing defense in the NFL last year.
Can't be worse than having the best passing defense.
The only thing we were pissed about, and then we kind of got over it, and then we were back to not being over it, was Chauncey Gardner-Johnson not being here. It's the only thing. And he's back. So I like that. And I do think the Eagles are going to be better off this year than they were last year at the cornerback position, because I do think I'm not for James Bradbury. I think he's already played his last game as an Eagle. John, I don't know where you're at on that.
Yeah.
But I don't forget how hyped I was going into last year, because James Bradbury was the victim going into last year. He gets called for a holding in the Super Bowl. He causes the game. Yeah. It's a little different this time around after the way last season ended for James
what
Bradbury.
I think is funny, because Sean is a direct disciple of Vic, obviously. Vic loves Sean Desai. And Sean would do all these crazy things, and like moving Bradbury to the slot, and we'd say, hey, what the hell's this guy doing? And Vic comes out and he says, yeah, I'd like to throw a lot at people early and see. And everybody's, all right, do what you need, Vic.
Yeah.
Does the exact same thing as Sean Desai, but we're like, well, it's Vic.
Well, you understand there's probably a method to the madness in a guy like Vic Fangio. You know,
I think
guy like Sean Desai, you're like, what's this guy
There was
know?
a method to his madness taught to him by Vic Fangio, but he didn't have the cachet to pull it off, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Vic, no one questions Vic.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we all had a math teacher in our lives. It doesn't mean we were all mathematicians. You know what I mean?
Well, that's true. That's true too. That's that Temple education. Well done, Mark.
Thank you very much. Graduated in 4 years. Very proud of that.
Yes.
Great stuff, Mark Farzetta. Thanks for joining the show, man. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
Oh, always a pleasure, fellas. See you.
There's
Thanks,
Mark
bud.
Farzetta joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff as always from Mark Farzetta. Does a great job. Make sure you listen to the Farzy Show, 6 to 7 a.m. every day, Monday through Friday. So great show there. Johnny Mac, another show in the books, Tuesday edition. Nick Sirianni heavy again. Maybe we can move on from this.
I don't know. Yeah, that's going to be the story.
I know it is.
Yeah, it's going to be the story. And the disconnect with the quarterback. Is there a disconnect? And blah blah. And, hey, the Eagles created this. This is a self-inflicted wound. That was, easy plaudit. Oh, he's doing a great job. That's it. Doing a really good job. And throw a couple other platitudes on there. It's been tremendous. He's still engaged. Still leading us well. Now he's more involved with other aspects of the football team. Bang. End of it. End of sentence. No issues. But he answered the way he answered. So I don't blame people for bringing it up.
No, I don't at all. Yeah. Did you see John Stolness? He wrote something about it. Boy, it was funny. He's like, what Jaylen Hurts could have responded. And he gave 3 of the easiest responses Jaylen could have given, and they were easy. I mean, they were one sentence easy.
Yeah.
And it just showed how much Jaylen really did avoid kind of going there with Nick, which I do think is interesting. I mean, look, I don't want to talk about it, but we're going to be talking about it for sure.
Yeah. Unfortunately, from my perspective, because I'd like not to talk about it, but yeah, self-inflicted wounds in many ways. But again, my focus is on I never liked the setup to begin with. I do not, and that's a Jeffrey Lurie problem. And so when Jeffrey's thinking about scapegoats after this season, he might want to look in the mirror. Obviously, he's not going to fire himself, but
no,
maybe he learns from it. At 72, I doubt it. He's had a history of this in recent seasons when the team doesn't reach his expectations. So I doubt it's going to change. But yeah, I don't like the way he set this thing up.
Yep, I'm with you. So we'll talk about all that and more coming up later this week on Birds 365. That's going to do it for Tuesday's edition. One more super chat we missed. John, did Isaiah Rodgers become Deion Sanders from Wolf?
No. Well, maybe in spring ball, yes. It's ironic. Deion wasn't known as the greatest tackler in the history of the world, to put it mildly. But yeah, that's the best probably coverage corner ever. The Eagles aren't going to play that style. Deion was great press corner. They're going to play ton of zone, but Isaiah was great. I mean, he was great in the spring, and to his credit, because Isaiah is big on social media if people want to follow him, he said it doesn't mean anything in the spring. He knows, and Christian Parker mentioned it as well, the new secondary coach. You got to see him with the pads on, because he wasn't great in run support, had a big missed tackle percentage when he was in Indianapolis, but for a guy who hasn't played football in over 500 days, he's an NFL player. So he proved that. Is he going to be Deion Sanders? No, he's not going to be Deion Sanders.
Rumor is the pipeline from Johnny Mac's OTA MVP to Deion Sanders has never been clearer. So we will see how Isaiah Rodgers pans out in this defense. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today on this Tuesday of the offseason and in warm June. I hope everybody has a chance to get outside today if the weather permits where you are. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Bob, James Jones, James Carver, a couple of you guys, Dank Bird Gang, JR, Slagger. We appreciate each and SMD Eagles. We appreciate all of you guys for being here today, our loyal listeners who make the show great every single day. So we appreciate all of you guys. Hit the like button on your way out. Johnny Mac, great Tuesday show. Thank you, sir. We'll catch you tomorrow on Birds 365.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Birds 365.
the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.